Florida State is different. Different. Reason why I say that, look at me. I've had a lot of opportunities. But you know what, though? I stay at my school and do the best with my school. Prime example. Once you're a Seminole, you're always a Seminole. You love this school, and this school gonna love you.
What's happening? What's happening? Y'all know what it is, and y'all know what I do. I bring the gospel, baby. I bring the gospel. If you're looking at this face and listening to this voice, you are officially back on the hot seat. I am your esteemed host, Smoke, and y'all know what we do on the hot seat, man. We set somebody's ass on fire. This week we're going to do something a little different, man. If you follow Florida State, you know that they're looking for a new head coach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Bob Stoops up against Odell Haggins, and I'm going to tell you who I think should be the next head football coach out of those two for Florida State, and I'm going to tell you why. So without any further ado, paying homage to the goats over my left and my right shoulder, let's get into it, man. This past Saturday, Florida State beat Boston College. Y'all really want to talk about the game? I ain't really seen nothing worth talking about in there, man. It was good to see James Blackman play a lesser defense. You see Alex Hornibrook usually get them trash-ass defenses, but now you see James Blackman get out there. He looked confident, man, made some throws we hadn't seen him make in a while. Probably the best we've seen him look, I ain't going to say all season, but at least since the first half of the season. I know y'all was happy to see Jordan Travis get out there, wasn't it? Y'all was happy to see Jordan Travis get out there. Probably want to hang with the Taggart for not putting his ass out there prior to. But to be honest with you, man, until I can see that goddamn boy throw a football, I don't give a shit about now one of them runs. Last I checked, he was still a quarterback, and quarterbacks throw the football. So that spring game shit really don't count to me. Until I can see Jordan Travis throw the football, I really don't have any comments about him. I think the defense played like shit. I don't think they played very well. I think they played like ass. Obviously, they played well enough to win, but I think they could have done much better. So, put that shit to bed. Let's go ahead and get to the meat and the potatoes of why we're here. Florida State looking for a new head coach, right? And if you are a Florida State fan, you know that they've zeroed in on a candidate. That candidate being Bob Stoops, former Oklahoma coach, Oklahoma Sooners. He has a track record that speaks for itself. Great coach, great background, has a really good eye for talent as it relates to coaching, has a coaching tree that is second to none. So I can definitely understand the hype and the excitement around Bob Stoops. Currently, the interim head coach of Florida State is Odell Haggins. Second stint as the interim head coach, he took the helm when Jimbo got up out of here, went to Texas A&M. Undefeated so far, undefeated, 3-0 as a head coach. So, is it 3-0? Whatever. Love Odell Haggins, man. Got nothing bad to say about the cat. We're just going to make this conversation very interesting. So, let me start out by saying this. In these conversations, one thing I think people are grossly neglecting is where Florida State is right now. This could very well be the most important hire in Florida State history. And I'll tell you why. When Jimbo was hired, you have to understand the expectation was different. Florida State wasn't really much to talk about then. So, at the very least, the expectation was to keep the program afloat. Well, Bobby just ended up overachieving like a motherfucker, right? He built it into the powerhouse that it is today. So, that hire versus this hire is different. Even when Jimbo came in, he came in what Florida State fans call the dark ages, the dark years for Florida State. And it was bad. Like, Bobby was probably senile around that time. I mean, y'all remember, I'm pretty sure everybody heard the story about when the Pouncey twins came in for an official visit and Bobby didn't know who the hell they were. Like, shit, how worse can it get than that, right? But even with what Bobby was asked to do then, not Bobby, but even what Jimbo was asked to do then, it's not the same as what this coach is going to be asked to do now. Florida State is in full rebuild. And understand that in order for it to be a rebuild, something had to be built and torn down for it to be rebuilt again. That's exactly what we're looking at right now. So whomever they hire, it's paramount that they hit on that person. That person is going to be tasked with rebuilding the Florida State brand. when Jimbo had it, that name still held weight. The logo was still the logo. It ain't like that no more. Florida State has lost a lot of luster over the last few years. And we're not going to sit here and discuss blame. That's for an entirely different show. I'm not going to do that shit right now. I'm just looking at things and how they are at the present moment. And it seems as if the one thing I can say Florida State has done that I do agree with is they're being proactive. It's almost like they're trying not to become what Tennessee is post Phil Fulmer, right? You've seen the litany of coaches they ran through, and none of them have done worth a fuck. You look at Miami, for example, since Coker, not to say that Coker was a great coach or anything, but since the glory years of Miami in the early 2000s, they've wallowed in obscurity for God knows how long. So it seems as if they're trying to make sure they don't go down that road. And this is the great time to do this because although Florida is the better of the big three in Florida, they haven't necessarily separated themselves. They haven't grasped how it seems like they haven't taken control of the state of Florida the way they could be, right? So that being said, I think right now it's imperative that they find somebody who can come in, put Florida State back to prominence and do it rather quickly because time isn't really on your side. Based off the way you fire Willie Taggart, how you fired him, you don't really have a lot of time. So this is why I laugh or I chuckle when I hear the name like a PJ Fleck or a Mike Norvell or a Matt Campbell. I've said this before, and I'm really tired of saying this shit. You can't fire Willie Taggart and hire him again. And I mean it in the sense of this. Why take a head coach who has a background from a lesser program and expect him to come in Florida State and rebuild the program when he doesn't have the resume to support it? Now, it's not that Willie Taggart had to rebuild the program, but those lie behind the scenes he had to rebuild. You're different with a different beast now. It's a different monster here. I'm not saying that those type of coaches wouldn't do a good job. Like lightning can strike twice. Like you look at the home run Florida hit when they got Urban Meyer from Utah. Listen, man, in the Nick Saban era, Urban Meyer is probably the second best head coach in that era, and that's saying something. Urban Meyer is really, really good. Like he's one of the few coaches who stood toe to toe with Nick Saban and lived to tell about it. And that's saying something because Nick, probably the greatest head coach in college football history, right? So for a guy who can, like I say, stand toe-to-toe with this guy and go head-to-head and live to tell about it, that speaks volumes to me. Well, I'm not saying one of those guys can't do it. I'm telling you that as it relates to what's at stake, why take that risk? And don't get me wrong, all of this is a fucking risk. Everything we do is a risk. Like when you wake up in the morning, your feet hit the fucking ground, you're taking a risk because you don't know how that day is going to end, right? There's a difference between a risk as it relates to high risk, high reward, things like that, and then there's a calculated risk. So let's revisit the last video. I told you about something I saw at the Independence Bowl in 2017 when Odell Haggins was the interim head coach. And that's when this shit started to fester into my head. That's when the cars got churning. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm looking at Odell Haggins versus the field. The field meaning the guys I hear you guys talk about in chat rooms and on message boards all goddamn day. Like the Scott Which one of you motherfuckers suggested that Scott Satterfield should be the next head coach at Florida State? Raise your motherfucking hand so I can slap the piss out of you. What does this program come to where people really think Scott Satterfield is a viable option? I'd be okay with this Deion Sanders shit before I'm okay with bringing Scott Satterfield in it. Like, are we really that fucking bad? Florida State really sucked that bad for y'all to start talking about Scott Satterfield? I'm convinced some of y'all retarded. Can't nobody tell me no motherfucking different. He's a good. I don't give a fuck how good of a goddamn coach he is. Scott Satterfield, y'all. I just got my damn point. I forgot where the fuck I was going with this shit. Scott Satterfield, shit. Give me a sec. I gotta remember where I was going with this. Yeah, Odell Haggins versus the field. Um, I don't believe in the fact that these guys can come in and do a job of Odell Haggins because Odell is a no. He's a no through and through. Who the hell would want to see the program succeed more than Odell Haggins? I was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and they were like, Odell doesn't have desire to be a head coach. How the hell do you know? He was never offered. It's easy to say you don't want to be someone nobody's asked you to do the shit. He was never offered. He was never really taken seriously, right? So I think if his name were thrown in the hat, I'm willing to bet you my next 5 checks to a bucket of shit. He'd be interested then. Um, I think that in the sense of a CEO role, when you're mentioning it, I said this on the last show. Well, the last show I spoke about Florida State. When you have an Ed Orgeron at LSU, they basically gave him a blank check and said, go get what you need, do what you have to do, right? I think when you look at it, Odell Haggins, if you give him the full support, if you give him the backing of the boosters and administration, and you put him in the same position you would put an Ed Orgeron in, I believe Odell Haggins would be just as successful, if not more. I don't think he'd do a bad job at all. You give him, because I've said this before, you give him somebody like a Joe Brady from LSU as an offensive coordinator. You give him somebody like a Jimmy Leggett as a defense coordinator from Washington, somebody like that, and you give him the best recruiters money can buy. You give him all the analysts he needs. Put him in the best position to win. Like, it's exciting to think about the product Odell Haggins will produce. It's exciting. And you got Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops got a resume that speaks for itself. And his coaching tree is second to none, which tells me he has a serious eye for talent in the coaching world. Everybody doesn't have that, which makes this decision as it relates to who I would choose even more difficult. But as it stands right now, I'd have to choose Bob Stoops. And that's not to say I don't think Odell wouldn't do well, because I just told you I think he'd do great. Things are too fragile right now at Florida State because again, we're talking about the type of risk. You need to hit, and you need to hit a home run. You can't go by what you think. That would be Odell Haggins. You have to go by what you know. That would be Bob Stoops. He's a winner. He's a champion. He has a resume that we can, like something tangible, something we can reach out and touch. We've seen him. Listen, man, and this goes back to these second tier coaches y'all be talking about. It's one thing, even with Odell. Let's just use Odell singularly here. It's one thing to coach at a program, right? It's another thing to be responsible and be held accountable for everything that goes on at that program. That's what you'd essentially be doing by being the head coach at Florida State University. This person has a very small window. And I don't mean to win. I mean, this person has a very small window to fuck up. Because by firing the coach 22 games into his tenure, you're telling us that we're not waiting around for this to take years and years and years to rebuild this program. You need to do this shit ASAP. Because you want something that people can be excited about, right? You want the boosters to start, if not start back donating money, continuing to donate money. Because I'm pretty sure a conversation had to be had with Willie Taggart as it relates to somebody who donates a fuckload of money and like, hey, listen, I'm not donating another goddamn dime until y'all get his ass out of there, because he ain't it. You have to bring in somebody who's going to excite those types of people. You're going to have to bring in somebody who's going to exert some level of energy and excitement into the fan base. Somebody that people are going to get behind faithfully. I'm not saying Odell isn't that person. All I'm saying is that if you have triple bypass surgery, are you going to go get the doctor everybody likes, somebody who's new, a rookie on the block, or are you going to go get a doctor who's proven to do these types of jobs time and time again with a very, very high success rate? That's what you're really being tasked with here. You have to really ask yourself, and this is a real simple question. Do you want Florida State to be good, or do you want Florida State to be great? I'm not saying Odell Haggins can't make Florida State great. I'm telling you, I don't know of him doing it prior. He hasn't had the opportunity, right? And I guess that's the knock on him here in this conversation. We've seen Bob Stoops do this shit. We've seen him do it time and time again. The iron is strike. The iron is hot to strike now. One thing Jimbo did that made whomever came in behind him more difficult for is what he did to the rivals, Florida and Miami. He out-recruited them religiously, and he beat them religiously. It's almost as if he maximized off of their ineptitude and their inconsistencies. Well, fast forward to now. That person has to pick up where Jimbo left off. Let's just skip Willie Taggart, right? He's going to have to pick up where Jimbo left off. Who is better tasked to do that? Because I'm almost certain that if Bob Stoops were to get this position, you wouldn't have any issue backing him with everything he needed. Analysts, assistant coaches, whatever. Whatever Bob wanted, you probably give him. I'm only going to say that based off the number as it relates to per year money he's rumored to be getting. And, depending on who you ask, the deal is already done. It's just like, it's almost like a formality. It's just more so of the minute things in the contract, the minuscule things that you're sitting here going over. They're saying the deal already done. Until pen hits paper, I don't fucking know. Until he's introduced as the next head coach, I don't fucking know. Understand I'm recording this Sunday night. Well, really, there's the very wee hours of Monday morning. Florida State has no permanent head coach. So if the shit gets announced by the time you see this motherfucking video, just remember I recorded it when it didn't have a goddamn coach. Thank you. My preference, hear me, my preference is Odell Haggins. And I'm only hinging that on the fact that I think, here we are, comparing lightning can strike twice. Meaning what you see with Ed Orgeron versus what you would see with Odell Haggins. I think it's possible. But I can't be a fan here. And I will ask you all to do the exact same goddamn thing that I'm doing. You can't be a fan. Do what's best for business. What's best for business is Bob Stoops. He has a track record that exceeds itself. I don't know what other way to say it. I don't know how many other languages you need to hear this shit in. And my disclaimer, it's not to say that Odell can't do the job. We just don't fucking know. If Florida State is in a rebuild, who would you trust to do the job better? It's not about who's a better coach as it relates to X's and O's. I'm not talking about that shit. There are plenty of coaches out here who are good at X's and O's. There's a difference at coaching at a program, and there's a difference at being accountable and responsible for everything at that program. Actually, this isn't even hard. To me, it's not hard. But we tend to make things difficult when we have these conversations and we get into the back and forth and we start debating about who we want versus who we need. I don't give a good goddamn who the coach is. I just know one thing for certain. They better have the backing and the support of that fucking administration and all those goddamn boosters based off how they got Willie out of here. Because if that coach doesn't have it, then it doesn't matter. I think you can bring anybody in here, to be honest with you, and they do a decent job if they had the full support. But we don't need a decent job. We don't need a good job. We need a great job. The great job is Bob Stoops. I hate to say it, but that's the goddamn truth. I would love to see Odell get a shot. I think he's more than deserving of a shot. But how do we know? What has the administration done for us to put our trust in them that they support Odell in whatever he needed? Odell doesn't really have any type of leverage to come in and ask for those type of things either, do they? In order for Odell to come in and get that shit, the booster would have to want to do it. With you calling Bob Stoops, with you seeking out Bob Stoops, he has all the leverage in the world. If you want me, this is what I need. The surefire way to get there is to get a coach who has leverage. Odell has none. Bob has all of it. Remove your fandom from your decision making. Remove your passion from the program and just look at this for what it is. Don't make this harder than what it is. This is another episode. Don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Don't make this harder than what it is. Bob Stoops should be the next football coach of Florida State. To be honest with you, if you don't give the job to Bob Stoops, if for some reason Bob Stoops decides he doesn't want this job, I still don't think you give it to Odell Haggins. I think you call James Franklin. James Franklin is somebody who has a hat he can hang on the fact that I've been at a big time program who was in shambles when I got there, and I was able to turn that shit around. Think about how bad Penn State was before James Franklin got there. You haven't heard a person utter the word Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky, or scandal since he's been there. He's removed the stigma that was Penn State, and he's added what is Penn State right now. Process that. Things were really bad when he got there. He didn't have to take that job, but he didn't look at him. As of right now, they are the second best team in the Big Ten and have been for a while. They've surpassed Michigan. This isn't about who you like. This isn't about who you prefer. It's about who's more qualified. If we're talking about qualification, it's Bob Stoops, and it's Bob Stoops by a fucking mile. I think Odell, and I have to keep saying this shit because if I don't, somebody will misconstrue my words and say that I don't think he'd do well. I think he'd do fantastic if he's given what he needs. We don't know that to be true because, again, the fucking administration are a bunch of idiots. We know for a fact that when Bob Stoops comes, Bob Stoops is coming and he's bringing hell with him. He's bringing everything he needs. The very last thing Florida wants to see, the very last thing Miami wants to see is Bob Stoops with everything he needs in his hand. Florida State will be back before you can bat your goddamn eye. Florida State will be back before you can say, I'll go there. See what I did there? That's all the time I'm giving you, man. That's all the time I got. I definitely appreciate your time. I definitely appreciate y'all hanging out with me. Please, please, please hit those like buttons for me. Hit those subscribe buttons for me, man. If you can, follow me on Instagram at the Hot Seat 19. Follow me on Twitter at the Hot Seat 19. I am sleepy as shit. Until next time, y'all know the routine. Y'all be good.